Ohai. Vietnam, the state in Southeast Asia on the peninsula of Indochina. In the west borders on Laos and Cambodia, in the north, on China, from the east and the south it is washed by the South China Sea. Name of the country. Consists of two words. Viet means the tidal nation, Viet, and Nam, the south, the southern Vieta, that represents a tracing paper from Chinese, Yan'an, where the Chinese name of Viet, and the south. For the first time the name Vietnam was used by the poet Nguyen Binh Kiem in the book Prophecies Chang Chinya in the 16th century, having written, and Vietnam was formed. This name was engraved on 12 steels of the 16th, 17th centuries, in particular in a pagoda Ba Lam in Haiphong. In 1804-1813 the Emperor Zia Long used the word Vietnam in official documents. However, till 1945 the country usually was called Tu Anas, while the name wasn't changed officially by the Emperor Ba Dai. In the I Millennium BB in the territory of modern southern China and modern northern Vietnam there were several states of ancient Viet. Among the first Drevnovietsky states more northern educations, first of all Engo's kingdom are most known. A whale. At. And the kingdom twists. A whale. U. Arisen in the 7th century BB in lower reaches of Yangtze. At the same time authentic sources didn't remain neither in the kingdom twists, nor in more southern states. Nevertheless, data of archaeology speak about existence in this territory. Especially in lower reaches of Yangtze and in the north of modern Vietnam, in lower reaches of the Red River, Songkha. The ancient and original center of statehood. The social structure of the kingdom twists. U. Was characterized by ancient sources as simpler in comparison with the neighboring ancient Chinese states. Also, unlike the ancient Chinese states, irrigation rice growing was major activity of the population of U. In the 7-3 centuries BB. Probably it occurred much earlier. In the territory between Maoziongzi and Krasnoreky 5 states appeared. Inhabited by ancestors of modern Viet, Lac Vietam, in lower reaches Krasnoreky, then on the east Tao. Nam Viet, Man Viet, Dong Viet. Then Tao was won by Van Lang and the general state of Olak formed. Cultural level of these educations was quite high. At the same time in northern kingdoms there was a loan of the Chinese culture more intensively than to southern. Ancient Vieta were generally manufacturing community members. Higher position was held by the land aristocracy and the slushly nobility who submitted to the governor Evian. Olak and Nam Viet waged wars with the Tsinsky Empire during which Nam Viet was captured by her. However, after falling of the empire, Kin Nam Viet and Olak united to the uniform state of Nam Viet in the 2nd century BB, conceding on the power only of the empire of Han. However, at the end of the 2nd century BB the country gets under the power of Hansky emperors. Despite short-term finding of independence as a result of a revolt of two sisters, Chinese dominion held on till the 9th century. Nevertheless, Lac Vieta actually kept the internal autonomy, constantly combating aggressors. At the same time, an important role in life of the country was played by patrimonial associations. Social and economic processes in China also affected Vietsky society a little.
In the same time, the Buddhism preached by the Indian monks, which adjoined to traditional cults of ancestors and forces of nature, gains distribution in the country.
In 541, the South Chinese state of Liang tried to subordinate stronger the Vietnamese elite, that led to a revolt led by the large official, the representative of one of the highest Ho Li Bon. As a result of several victories, he was proclaimed by the emperor, having based a dynasty early Li. 541-603. In 544, the state of Viet receives the name Hoang Quan, the Empire of Uncountable Spring. After Li Bon was killed during new battle with Chinese, the actual head of the country there was Yu Kong Fuk, who banished interventionists in 551.
From this point in Venezuela, the internal war which divided the country into two parts began.
Western, led by Yu Kong Fuk, and East, operated by the distant relative of Li Bon, Li Fatyu. In 602, the Empire of Sui of the beginning, which united all China, war minds the Vietski state of Hoang Quan. In 603, Vietski troops were broken. Hoang Quan was forced to recognize the power Sui. The occupied Hoang Quan's territory was called Chinese of Xiaoti, then Xiaotia, and since 679, Tuanas a Dakofa.
In 880, the Chinese troops left the southern Vietski Namestnichestvo to Anazadekofa. In 939, Ngoc Yen defeated the Chinese, trying to influence on Viet and based Ngo's dynasty, which fell in 961.
In 968, this territory was integrated in Bolin under the name of Dakoviet, Great Ancient Twists. Then Bolin created regular army, finished internal conflicts, and ordered the divisive officials.
From 981 to 1009 in power there was a dynasty of Erlila. Since 1010 the country, which was called now by Daviet, operated lately, which pursued policy of strengthening of the central power at preservation of communal self-government. In 1225, in the conditions of the distemper caused by economic difficulties, the power is passed to related by Li Chanam.
1225-1400, which based a new dynasty. In the second half of the 13th century of Daviet, as well as other states of Southeast Asia, I got under blow of the Mongolian invasions.
In 1285 the army of the son of Ubelai Hanna Tugan acted from China and intruded in borders of the Vietnamese state, which was attacked as well from the sea. In the delta of the Red River the Mongol-Chinese landed.
However, strength of aggressors were crushed at the Kao River. Back only the 10th part of interventionists returned to China. Fight on the river Batang became a final victory of Viet.
The Mongolian fleet, enticed by junks of Viet, encountered the pointed trunks of trees which are previously hammered with them into a riverbed.
The Mongolian vessels were thrown by the burning torches and arrows.
In 1400 the military leader Huo Kuili deposed the last governor from a dynasty Chang. Huo Kuili undertook a number of reforms, in particular entered paper money.
In his board the central power amplified again. However, in 1407 the country was occupied again by the Chinese, called by supporters of the overthrown Chang's dynasty. The Chinese dominion was opposed by the feudal lord Aslallah, who after successful liberating war in 1427 proclaimed himself the new emperor, having based a dynasty lately governing before a revolt of Tishan at the end of the 18th century. Tried to limit Tulala large land tenure, encouraging at the same time small land tenure. General accounting of state lands which were divided between peasants was carried out. Strict restrictions were imposed on purchase and sale of the earth. Allocation to officials of communal lands according to their rank practiced. In the second half of the 15th century, Vietnam passes to offensive policy again, having captured the next Diem Pas de Comment I and East areas Lan Xang, fallen into dependence on the Vietnamese governors. The Buddhism yields the position to traditional beliefs and Confucianism. In the 70th of the 15th century, the system of 9 ranks of officials which could apply for increase every 6 years was introduced.
The most widespread way of receiving a new position examination on an academic degree became the Comment II.
Feature of the Vietnamese nobility during this period was the lack of hereditary fixedness of the status and, respectively, high social mobility.
In the 16th century, in the country which gradually passed from the power of civil officials to the power of military and landowners, clans crisis began.
Wars and bulky administrative personnel ruined peasants. Attention wasn't paid to development of agriculture and irrigational systems.
Discontent of the population was caused also by the begun process of stratification of community, the social base of the Vietnamese society.
The actual power in the country belonged to the end of the first quarter of the 17th century to 2 influential clans. In the north from the province of Nguyen, family Chini, in the south Hang Nam. The revolt Tishanov in a northern part of controlled Uyunami of the territory became 1773-1802 the culmination of crisis.
30 years civil war terminated in defeat risen and the accession of the governor from a dynasty Enganav which proclaimed itself the emperor under the name of Zia Lom.
Vietnam became the uniform state founded on the Confucian principles again.
At the beginning of the 19th century, the amplified Vietnam conducted long fight against Siam for control over Cambodia. In 1858, under the pretext of refusal of the Vietnamese government, the French invasion into Vietnam began to accept requirements about freedom of trade. The colony de French de Quinquina, to whom in 1867 3 western provinces were added, was formed of 3 east provinces occupied in 1862. Thus, under the French influence, it appeared all southern Vietnam.
In 1873, the next invasion into northern and central Vietnam, which terminated in 1874 in the trade agreement, unprofitable for Vietnamese, which though didn't come into force in the 80th was organized, it was used as a pretext for a new intervention. In 1882 the French captured Hanoi, and in 1883 forced Vietnam to sign the Contract on Protectorate. Finally, colonial mode was approved in 1885. In the second half of the 19th century, Vietnam got to colonial dependence on France. The country was artificially divided into 3 parts: King Kin's colony, the southern Vietnam, protectorates to Annes, the central Vietnam, and Tonkin, northern Vietnam. Together with Laos and Cambodia, Vietnam was a part of the French Indochina.
By 1930th years in the country, there was a powerful national liberation movement headed by the Communist Party of Indochina.
Pick the leader, Ho Chi Minh. In the years of World War II, Vietnam was captured by the Japanese, who disarmed, and then completely neutralizing the French garrisons.
By the end of war, Japanese were forced to disengage the troops for strengthening of defense of Japan and Manchuria, having formed at the same time in the territory of Vietnam the puppet Vietnamese Empire led by the successor of the Vietnamese imperial dynasty Nguyen Ba Đệ.
Having used the arisen vacuum of the power, the communists who created Viet Minh in 1941 at the two-party conference in Tangkao made on August 13, 1945 the decision on a revolt and elected provisional government led by Ho Chi Minh. The August Revolution liquidated the last institutes of colonial administration. On August 19 the revolt won Hanoi, on August 23, Hue, on August 25, Saigon. On August 30 Bao Dai publicly renounced an imperial throne.
On September 2, 1945 on a 500,000 meeting in Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh published the Declaration of Independence, having declared the World Declaration in all Vietnamese territory of the new state, the Democratic Republic of Vietnam.
DERV. And on November 9, 1946 the National Assembly of DERV adopted the Constitution which proclaimed legislature the National Assembly elected by the people for a period of 3 years between which sessions the Standing Committee of the National Assembly, with the head of state, the President elected by the National Assembly, executive body, the government, local representative bodies, national councils, local executive bodies, administrative committees, judicial authorities, the Supreme Court, courts of appeal, courts of first instance worked. However, the international background in 1945-1946 was extremely adverse for DERV. According to the Potsdam Agreement, the USA and England had to carry out disarmament of the Japanese troops. The USA entrusted this right to Chiang Kai-shek's troops which occupied a northern part of Vietnam, beginning from 16C.
Always the English troops occupied respectively the southern part of Vietnam, beginning from the 16th parallel.
The English command didn't recognize DERV and, moreover, helped return to the south of Vietnam of the French case. Thus, for the first time in the history of the country and at the same time there were so many invaders. On November 11, 1945, PIC for tactical reasons declared self-dissolution, continuing to work informally.
On this difficult international background, on March 6, 1946, Ho Chi Minh's government went for signing with France of so-called agreements of Ho Centennion, which agreed to stay of the country as a part of the French Union in exchange for recognition of sovereignty of DERV.
Under this agreement of DERV recognized military presence of France.
Instead of Chiang Kai-shek's army, which had to be removed under the French-Chinese agreement concluded in February.
For a period of 5 years. The status of the south of Vietnam, at the time Kikinkina, had to solve a referendum.
However, France sought for complete recovery of a colonial system as it was sure of the military superiority.
Continuation of the French-Vietnamese negotiations in April-May 1946 in Dalat didn't yield any positive results. Both parties only played for time or better to be prepared for war. In May 1946, the National Union of Vietnam, the Line Viet Front which united Viet Minh and many parties and the organizations of Vietnam for the purpose of joint fight of the minding French colonialists was created. Negotiations with the French side continued up to December 1946 when finally it became clear that war is inevitable and active fighting began.
In November-December 1946, between the Vietnamese and French sides, there were first military collisions which actually cancelled the concluded earlier Vietnam-French agreements. On December 18, 1946, the Central Committee of PIC in Van Phuc held a meeting at which the decision to develop war of resistance through the whole country was made.
On December 19, fights which didn't stop also in January of the 1947 were started. National, comprehensive and long war, with long guerrilla character began. War between France and its former colonies, including Vietnam, took place in 3 stages: defenses, active resistance and general counterattack. At the first stage of war, the military and political authorities Viet Minh avoided large fights, seeking to win time for completion of creation not until the end of the created regular army yet and to gain fighting experience. Troops of DERV at this stage left the main cities and the provincial centers. Fighting was transferred to villages, mountains and forests. The French forwarding case occupied the most part of the cities and coastal areas. Northern Vietnam became the main arena of fights. In the fall of 1947, the French made an attempt to occupy the headquarters of the Management Viet Minh, which is then in Viet Bok, but suffered great defeat and were forced to recede, having suffered heavy losses. After defeat in Viet Bok, in 1948-1950 in war there came the period of balance of forces. France refused offensive operations, passed to strategic defense of the regions of DERV occupied by her, and decided to be at war against Vietnamese Han's of Vietnamese. In May 1948, colonialists formed in the occupied territory puppet government Nguyen Xuan Nga, and in a year declared creation of the state of Vietnam headed by the former Emperor Bao Dai, the last representative of a dynasty Nganaf. In the period of calm, when large military campaigns weren't conducted, in the territories under control of DERV, began to carry out agrarian transformations and to carry out measures for strengthening of army and fixing of the power. Decrees about confiscation of lands of the French colonialists and Vietnamese traitors, and about their transfer to temporary use to poor peasants, about decrease in the rent for the earth for 25% were issued, about a rent relationship and reduction of debt interests, etc. 5 March 1950 Nationalization of mineral richness of the country, the main irrigational systems, forests and means of communication began. The decree of November 4, 1949 entered general obligatory military service.
Under the leadership of the general, a number of measures for transformation of army from amateur in professional was carried out to Nguyen Giap.
In it, Viet Minh China, with which in 1950 diplomatic relations were established, provided substantial assistance. Diplomatic relations and with the USA were the same year established. In 1950 during war there came the change. In 1949 Viet Minh made the first educational attempts of offensive operations, having attacked the French forts in vicinities La Caille. In 1950 Viet Minh began offensive operations with the purpose to clear away the territory's border with China, for opening of a corridor on which the help from the socialist countries could come to DERV. As a result of raid, the extensive region of northern Vietnam was freed. In 1951 Giap began a campaign of general counterattack, but it came to the end unsuccessfully, having brought too big losses. In 1951 PIC was renamed into the Party of Workers of Vietnam. PUV. The party began to work as officially existing organization. The same year there was Viet Minh and Line Viet's merge in the United National Front of Line Viet.
Economic reforms were undertaken
in bank, monetary, tax, customs spheres.
In 1953, despite intervention in war from the USA and her active help, which size in 1953 reached 80% of military expenses of France, the Vietnamese National Army began general approach on all fronts, which continued till July 1954.
In the spring of 1954 it crushed forces of the French colonial army in the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, which became the largest victory of Derv in War of Resistance.
Great military defeats and anti-war protests in France forced the French government to go for negotiations on settlement of an Indochina problem.
In July 1954 at the Geneva Conference, agreements on restoration of peace in Indochina were signed.
Agreements provided that armed forces of Derv and France will cease fire and within 300 days will finish a regrouping of troops in two zones, respectively to the north and to the south from the line of demarcation established approximately on the 17th parallel. In 2 years, holding a general election which had to create the uniform government of Vietnam was provided and complete association of the country.
Signing of the Geneva Accords meant the international recognition of sovereignty and independence of Vietnam. In the summer of 1954, the Geneva Accords providing full independence of Vietnam, Laos and Cambodia, and also the fastest holding a free and general election were signed.
Before elections, the territory of Vietnam was temporarily divided down the river Bang He into two halves.
The similar situation didn't suit the USA, which sought to interfere with distribution of communism in Southeast Asia. With assistance of the United States, elections were broken. The Republic of Vietnam, with the capital in Saigon, which was headed by Nguyen Dinh Diem in the south, was proclaimed. In 1959, the leadership of the Northern Democratic Republic of Vietnam, DRV, came to a conclusion about need of association of the country by force. The National Front of Liberation of the Southern Vietnam, PHOAV, is also known as Viet Cong, which the guerrilla operations tried to undermine influence of the Saigon mode on peripheries, was created. Same year, the new constitution, which renamed the government into Administrative Council, and the Supreme Court in the Supreme National Court was adopted. Courts of appeal and courts of first instance were abolished, and instead of them local national courts were created. The Supreme National Prosecutor's Office and local national prosecutors' offices were created.
By 1965, PHOAV controlled not less than 30% of the territory of the southern Vietnam.
In reply to the USA used the Tonkinski incident, firing by the Vietnamese boats of the American destroyer, which was allegedly in neutral waters, to start systematic bombings of DRV, and began shift of troops to the southern Vietnam for fight against PHOAV. The Vietnamese War began. However, resolute actions of guerrillas in the south and successful opposition of DRV to air raids, with considerable support of the USSR,
led to impressive losses among Americans and forced Washington to sign the Parisian peace agreements, under which the American troops were disengaged from Vietnam in 1973.
Without the American support, the Saigon mode, which was in deep crisis, quickly fell as a result of approach of the North Vietnamese troops. On April 30, 1975, the South Vietnamese troops handed over Saigon. The serious conflicts took place also in domestic policy of northern Vietnam. In a management of the Communist Party, supporters of the most rigid course and more moderate group were allocated.
Elected the chairman of the Central Organizational Commission of the Central Committee of Go and the Minister of Public Safety Jan Dong, with the assistance of the Secretary of the Central Committee and with the consent of Ho Gaimin, organized a campaign of repressions against the anti-party group, moderate and supporters of the Minister of Defense in Yanzada. On July 2, 1976 there was an association of the North and South of Vietnam to the Socialist Republic of Vietnam.
In 1976 the new constitution of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, SAROV, was adopted. Saigon is renamed into Ho Chi Minh. The Standing Committee of the National Assembly and a position of the President were abolished. Their functions passed to the State Council. Government Council was renamed into Council of Ministers. The Prime Minister's position in a position of the Chairman of the Board of Ministers. Administrative committees began to be called national committees. In 1974 China annexed the Paracel Islands, which are to the southeast from the island of Hainan. In December 1978 the Vietnamese troops in response to aggression were included into Cambodia and overthrew Pol Pot's regime that caused sharp discontent of the People's Republic of China. In the spring of 1979 the Chinese-Vietnamese War, during which the army of SAROV managed to stop approach of the Chinese troops which intruded in the country, resulted, having put them big losses. Diplomatic intervention of the USA forced the People's Republic of China to refuse further actions against Vietnam. After that, on the Chinese-Vietnamese border the armed incidents periodically occurred. War aggravated also an internal political situation in Vietnam. The former member of the Politburo Hong Van Joan fled to China, performed party management, the next political cleaning of ranks.
During short-term border war in 1979 China tore away from Vietnam disputed territories in the north.
China also occupied a part of the islands of Spratly.
Completely a relationship of the People's Republic of China and SAROV were restored only in 1991 following the results of the summit talks which took place on November 5, 10.
In the 1980th years anti-communist political emigration and an underground tried to show armed resistance.
Actions of emigrant and insurgent formation. The National United Front of Liberation of Vietnam under command of the former South Vietnamese officers of Ho Nolarada Mi and La Hoanga were the most large-scale.
Such attempts rigidly were suppressed with the authorities. Raid under Dao Baoqi's command in August 1989 was the last armed action of insurgents from abroad. Blind copying of the Soviet model of the national economy led to a serious economic crisis in Vietnam.
Under the influence of reorganization in the USA and reforms in the People's Republic of China, the Vietnamese leaders in 1986 announced the beginning of carrying out policy of updating. This course provided gradual and careful liberalization of social and economic life under strict control of the state and Communist Party in actually political sphere, with maintaining formal attributes of a socialist system.
In 1988 the Socialist Party of Vietnam and the Democratic Party of Vietnam dissolved itself. In 1992 the Constitution of Vietnam existing at the moment was adopted, the State Council was abolished, the Standing Committee of the National Assembly and the President's position were recreated, the Council of Ministers was renamed into the Government, a position of the Chairman of the Board of Ministers in the Prime Minister's position.
Now in Vietnam there was a partial liberalization of an economic system and considerable expansion of contacts with foreign countries at some weakening of party control over all spheres of public life.
Vietnam, the full member of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN. There are diplomatic relations with the USA. Diplomatic relations with the US are established on January 30, 1950. On the form of government Vietnam, Sarav is the Republic. The existing constitution is adopted on April 15, 1992.
According to the Constitution, the leading role in the state and society belongs to the Communist Party of Vietnam. The supreme body of the government is the unicameral National Assembly consisting of 498 deputies elected for 5 years by a universal direct vote.
Only the National Assembly can adopt the Constitution and laws. It also exercises control of compliance with laws and constitutions. Incompetence of the National Assembly. There is a consideration of reports on work of the President, Standing Committee of the National Assembly, Government, Supreme National Court and Supreme National Prosecutor's Office. The meeting approves the draft budget, establishes or cancels taxes. This body has rights to choose, release, recall the President, the Vice President, the Chairman of the National Assembly and his deputies, members of Standing Committee of the National Assembly, the Prime Minister, the Chairman of the Supreme National Court and the Chief Prosecutor of the Supreme National Prosecutor's Office. Approves the proposal of the Prime Minister on appointment or a response of members of the government.
Repeals acts of the above-named bodies and officials in case of their contradiction of the Constitution, to laws or resolutions of the National Assembly.
Among some other powers of the National Assembly: making decision on amnesty, establishment of military, etc. Ranks, solution of questions of war and peace, ratification and denunciation of international treaties or contracts with participation of Vietnam, solution of a question of a national referendum. In the 2010 years it turned out that the National Assembly can refuse to the government of the country. In 2010 the Parliament blocked. Is expensive and inefficient. The project of construction of the high-speed railroad between the north and the south of Vietnam introduced by the government. Permanent intercession body of the National Assembly is his Standing Committee. He announces elections and convenes the sessions of the National Assembly. Interprets the Constitution, laws and decrees. Issues decrees at the request of the National Assembly. Exercises control of observance of the Constitution and laws. Controls activity of the government, Supreme National Court and Supreme National Prosecutor's Office. Suspends the acts of the government, the Prime Minister, the Supreme National Courts. Supreme National Prosecutor's Office contradicting the Constitution, laws, resolutions of the National Assembly and repeals their acts contradicting decrees and decisions of Standing Committee. His Standing Committee has the right to approve the proposal of the Prime Minister on appointment, release a response of members of the government and to report on it to the National Assembly at the next session. The head of state is the President responsible before the National Assembly. He is elected by the National Assembly from among deputies for a 5-year term.
Such powers as enter competence of the President.
Publication of the Constitution, laws, decrees. Entering into the National Assembly of Office on appointment, release a response of the Vice President and Prime Minister, Chairman of the Supreme National Court and Chief Prosecutor of the Supreme National Prosecutor's Office. The conclusion on behalf of Sahrav of international treaties. Publication of orders and decisions. The Supreme Command of Armed Forces and so forth. Since October 23, 2018, the President of Sahrav is the Secretary General of KPV Nguyen Phu Trong. Thus, for the first time since the time of Ho Chi Minh, there was a combination of the top posts of party and state. Cheong Tin's status as the Chairman of the State Council of Sahrav wasn't equivalent to presidential. Executive body of the National Assembly and the supreme administrative organ of Sahrav is the government responsible before the National Assembly, his standing committee and the President. The Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Ministers, Ministers and other dicks are a part of the government. On the basis of acts of higher bodies, the government issues resolutions and decisions, and the Prime Minister, decisions and directives. In the administrative relation, Vietnam consists of 58 provinces and 5 cities of the Central Submission: Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh, Haiphong, Da Nang and Kinh Do. National councils, the public authorities elected by the population, work in these cities and provinces. The term of their powers -4 years. Provinces are divided into districts, counties, in which as it is universal in the cities and villages, communities. The national councils elected by the population work.
Since 1997, provinces and other administrative and territorial units were granted the right to be engaged in the foreign trade operations.
The judicial system includes the Supreme National Court in Hanoi and inferior national courts in provinces and the large cities. The National Assembly can, in special cases, for example, when the interests of national security are infringed, to create the decision special body of legal proceedings. The Supreme National Court exercises control of work of subordinated institutions. Representatives of ethnic minorities are given the right to use the native language in court. National inspections operate on the state and provincial levels and in army, responsibles of prosecutors' office who carry out tasks of control over the implementation of the law in public institutions, the private organizations, the military personnel and civilians, direct each of which. The judge considers cases on processes together with the Council of Jurymen consisting of 5-9 people. In the country there are over 10,000 such councils. Political parties.
The Communist Party of Vietnam ruling is created in February 1930 at the unifying conference of the communistic groups existing from 1920 years, which took place in emigration in Hong Kong.
Ho Chi Minh became the party leader. In October 1930 she was renamed into the Communist Party of Indochina. PIC. In February 1951 PIC was transformed to the Party of Workers of Vietnam. PUV. Ho Chi Minh, remaining on this post to death in 1969, became the chairman of the Central Committee. In December 1976 T was renamed into the Communist Party of Vietnam. Le Duc, who remained him to the death in 1986, became the Secretary General of KPV.
KPV is the only party in the country as Democratic and Socialist parties stopped the existence in 1988. The Domestic Front of Vietnam, created in 1955 and which included in 1977 in the structure the National Front of Liberation of the Southern Vietnam.
1960-1977. And the Union of National, Democratic and Peaceful Forces of the Southern Vietnam. 1968-1977. Is distinguished from other political organizations. The Domestic Front of Vietnam includes also Communist Party, General Confederation of Workers. It is created in 1976. The Union of Communistic Youth of Ho Chi Minh. It is created in 1931. The Union of Women of Vietnam. It is created in 1930. And other organizations. The legal system of Vietnam developed as a result of interaction of the feudal Vietnamese law, handwritten and usual, French law and the right of the socialist countries. During the pre-colonial period had the Vietnamese right much in common with the Chinese legal system. The legislation paled into insignificance here. The main role was played by ethical standards. The right was applied subsidiarno and only for permission of questions of the state value. The legislator left regulation of a relationship between individuals to family and community, giving to them the right of application of criminal sanctions. During the French colonial domination, the Western legal norms and institutes alien to local mentality took root. During this period, the country was divided into 3 zones: Northern, Central and Southern, in which various legislation worked. Takinkina, the Southern Vietnam, received the status of colony and completely submitted to the French legislation. The status of colony and a corresponding legal regime had also 3 cities in the north: Hanoi, Haiphong and Turin. To Annas, the Central Vietnam, was the French protectorate and nominally the local king ruled here. In 1925 the King Anama delegated the administrative and legislative powers to the French High Commissioner. Northern Vietnam, though had the status of protectorate, submitted directly to France. In the Southern Vietnam and 3 listed cities the civil legislation worked under the decree of 1883. However, it was incomplete and in undescribed cases it was necessary to address the civil code of the Central Vietnam or common law, which was written down in 1815 in the Code of Gia Long. Unlike U Shinh, the Central Vietnam had fuller codes. Civil 1936-1939. Code of Civil and Trade Process 1919. Criminal Code 1933. Code of Criminal Procedure and Trade Code 1942. In Northern Vietnam the Civil Code 1931 was adopted. After independence, finding Vietnam was divided into 2 parts in which right developed differently. In Derv, practically all colonial legislation was replaced. Bases of a legal system of socialist type were enshrined in the Constitution 1959. The Soviet legislation became a sample for the system. In the Southern Vietnam the old legislation remained. However, after 1954 operation of all foreign acts was cancelled. Declaration in 1975 of Uniform Vietnam demanded standardization of the legislation, which had to be constructed on the socialist principles.
The course towards the transition to a market relationship taken in 1986 demanded almost full reorganization of a legal system again.
In 1992 the new constitution, and in 1995 the first all-Vietnamese civil code was adopted. However, the legal system of Vietnam kept some former lines. An exclusive management of the Communist Party, the official nature of Marxist-Leninist ideology, a primacy of socialist property, public and state interests over private. Sources of law: Constitution, laws and resolutions of the National Assembly, decrees, and resolutions of Standing Committee of the National Assembly, orders, ordinances, and decisions of the President of the Republic, decision and directive of the government, bylaws of the ministries and departments, local authorities. In remote rural areas the common law can be used. According to Article 5 of the Constitution, each nationality has the right to keep and develop the great customs. Holidays and symbolics: Titus, New Year, week of days off in January or February. It is noted according to the lunisolar calendar, respectively. The holiday has no fixed date. Day of foundation of the Communist Party of Vietnam, on February 3. The Day of Remembrance of Kings Hun Go is usually celebrated in April. It is noted according to the lunisolar calendar, respectively. The holiday has no fixed date. On April 30, Day of Liberation of the Southern Vietnam. On May 1, Day of Workers. On September 2, the Independence Day. From France since 1945. Everything, as for the Vietnamese National Army and other law enforcement agencies, is strictly secret.
In November 1998, the National Assembly voted for transparency of information in the sphere of public administration. Then the government developed the detailed orientation program of the public with questions of financing of the services and departments run by him.
She doesn't concern army, bodies of internal security and the party organizations. The number of the military personnel in the country is estimated by about 0.5 million people, and staff of bodies of safety -2 million people. Law enforcement bodies: the Vietnamese National Police, the state security agencies, the Vietnamese National Safety.
The Minister of Defense of Vietnam since 2016 is the General Ngo Xuan Lit, the Minister of Public Safety the Colonel General Tu Lam.
Both generals, members of the Politburo of the Central Committee of KPV.
On August 31, 2004, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the DDR reported a response of the North Korean ambassador in Vietnam in connection with participation of Vietnam in a plot, as a result of which in July 2004 to South Korea 460 North Korean refugees were brought. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the DDR demanded from Vietnam of official apologies and threatened to recall all staff of the diplomatic mission in Vietnam if the authorities of this country don't guarantee not repetition of such incidents. Administrative Division of Vietnam is defined according to the Constitution of Vietnam of 1992 and has 3 levels.
At the first, largest level, the whole country is divided into 58 provinces and 5 large cities of the central submission having the same status as well as provinces. At the second level there are less large administrative units, urban areas, the cities of provincial submission, small towns of local value and rural areas, counties.
At the third level there are smallest administrative units, city quarters, city communities, communes and rural communities, communes.
Smaller level of villages, etc. Isn't administrative. More than 80% of the territory of Vietnam occupy low and medium altitude mountains. In the north the friend parallel to the friend clumpy and folded ridges of southeast Pro-Deleting, Hongblinchen.
With the highest point of Vietnam Mount Phanxiotan -3143 m. Are stretched to Shusunkitiai, Shamshao divided by narrow, deep longitudinal valleys.
Along the western border are stretched Mount Xiangshan and Namsky Mountains. In the central and southern part of the country Sokol and Basalt Plateaus, Pleiku, Daklak, Lambian, Zilan making the central plateau are located. The largest and deepest rivers of Southeast Asia Songkha and Mekong finish the current in the territory of Vietnam, flowing into the South China Sea. In lower reaches and the Delta Hong Kai in the north of Vietnam the alluvial and deltoid plain of Bac Bo is located. Here the greatest population density of the country. 1100 man/km. The capital of Vietnam, Hanoi, is also located.
The extensive alluvial and deltoid plain of Nam Bo is located in the extreme southwest of the country in the delta of Mekong.
Population density is here too high. The 450th man/km. The largest city of the country, Ho Chi Minh, is also located.
It's set of the small rivers which are flowing down from Plateau Tinh Dien and the Namsky Mountains in places of confluence with the South China Sea formed a narrow strip of accumulative seaside plains. Vietnam is located in the field of subequatorial monsoonal climate, but owing to the big extent of the country from the north on the south, climatic conditions in her territory differ a little.
The winter in the south hot, 26 C. In the north cool, 15 C. Air temperature sometimes goes down to 1 C because of penetration of cold air from China. In mountains at the height more than 1500 m there are frosts. The mode of loss of rainfall also changes across the territory of Vietnam. Winter dry in the south and damp in the north, and in the summer monsoonal rains water all territory of the country. At the end of summer and in early autumn the coast of Vietnam is visited destructive force by typhoons. On Navatroni slopes of mountains in a year 2500, 3000 m of rainfall, on leeward -700, 900 m dropout. This state in Southeast Asia located on the peninsula of Indochina. In the west borders on Laos and Cambodia, in the north, on China, from the east and the south it is washed by the South China Sea. The territory of Vietnam is extended in the meridional direction. Distance between extreme northern and southern points ap. 1750 km. And in the width direction its extent from 616 km in the north. From Mon Kaia to the Vietnamese-Laotian border. Up to 46.5 km in the central part. In the field of Trung Bo. Extent of the coastline is 30-60 km.
A variety of an environment of Vietnam is caused by his arrangement on a joint of various natural zones and the ancient geological structure.
Country relief mountain. More than 3/4 occupy mountains, the Plateau and Plateaus, from the neighboring states of Vietnam separate ridges. Islands and archipelagos also belong to Vietnam. In Vietnam there are 2360 rivers which extent exceeds 10 km. 16 of them have the area water collecting pools over 2,000 square km. 9 rivers of Vietnam have the pool over 10,000 square km. Basins of these 9 rivers cover 80% of the territory of the country and make 70% of her water resources. The deepest rivers of the country is Mekong in the south and Songkha Red River in the north. Length of Mekong is about 4,900 km, the area of the pool of 795,000 square km. Length of the Red River is 1183 km, the area of the pool about 158,000 square km. Northern part of Vietnam is rich with various minerals. Of them coal, iron ore, lead, zinc, bow, tungsten, tin, ores of rare earth elements are main. In the southern part of the country coal fields, gold and molybdenum are known. The climate considerably differs between northern and southern Vietnam. In the north there is a temperate, changeable, tropical climate. There is a cool season from November to April and hot from May to October. In the south of Vietnam, tropical climate. Warm to very hot during the whole year, is more cool from November to January, hot from February to May, and a rainy season from May to October. During a rainy season, typhoons which can cause floods often storm. It is especially frequent in the delta of Mekong, but also in other coastal regions there are floods.
From 1990th years the delta of Mekong even more often feels threat of flooding because of global warming.
Rise in level of the ocean and hurricanes lead to earth landslides. Thai State created management of the State Program of Environmental Protection in Counteraction to Climate Changes predicts that in 2100 sea level can rise by 1 meter, and provinces of the delta of Mekong are threatened by almost full flooding. The government carries out the program of counteraction with different scenarios of development. According to the program, dams are under construction, the areas of the protective coastal woods are updated, there are works on adaptation of flora and fauna to climate changes. Population minus 93,976,347. Assessment for July 2015. Annual gain minus 1.1%. Fertility minus 1.91 births on the woman, the 137th place in the world. Average life expectancy minus 69.7 years at men, 74. 9 years is at women. Urban population minus 30%. Literacy minus 96% of men, 92% of women. Assessment of 2002. Contamination, a virus of an immunodeficiency. HIV. Minus 0.4%. According to 2009. Ethnic structure, Viet of 85.7%, Conceal 1.9%, 1.8%, Myong of 1.5%, Khmers of 1.5%, Mia of 1.2%, Inanga of 1.1% and other. On a census of 2009. Religions, Buddhists of 9.3%, Catholics of 6.7%, Hoa Hao of 1.5%, Cao Dai of 1.1%, Protestants of 0. 5%, atheists and followers of local animistic cults of 80.8%. On a census of 1999.
The main religion of Vietnamese is the system of folk beliefs which bases rituals, make a shelter that.
A cult of ancestors. The countries which are strictly executed by most of inhabitants. This cult has no issued dogma, hierarchy of clergy and the social organization. Communities, arrivals, etc. And therefore has no status of religious faith. During the census of 1999, all persons who found it difficult to specify the confessional accessory were written down in the category of atheists. It is also necessary to notice that as the place of departure of a cult of ancestors often serve Buddhist temples, another popular delusion according to which more than 80% of Vietnamese Buddhists is caused. The state and bureaucratic control system of economy led in the mid-80s to her chronic crisis.
In 1986, the period of reforms on development of a market relationship at preservation of socialist reference points of development began. In 1990, the National Assembly adopted the first laws on private enterprises, on joint stock companies and on limited liability companies, for which the French legislation served as model.
However, the state reserved the right of complete control over private business. A new social and economic relationship received confirmation and in the Constitution of 1992, according to which economic life is based on a public, collective and private property. Article 15. Privatization of a number of the state enterprises, which number decreased from, in 1991 up to 6,300 in 1995, was carried out. The last occurred as due to liquidation of the weak enterprises and merging of the enterprises. In 1991, the state for the first time placed bonds of a state loan for 220.5 billion dong. Bonds in dollars began to be issued further. Market reforms resulted in good results. From 1990 to 1997, DDD increased annually by 8.9%.
In 1995-1997, Vietnam was in the lead among ASEAN member countries.
To 2000 DDD per capita, I made $400. Direct foreign investments, which in 1991 equaled $2.3 billion in 1997, increased to $31.2 billion, that made 30% of all capital investments. In 1998, export of goods and services made 42% of DDD, import minus 47% of VVV.
Asian financial crisis 1998-1999 led to the fact that import to the country decreased by 3% at expansion of export for 0.9%, and the volume of foreign investments was reduced.
DDD in 2009-92. $4 billion of DDD per capita. At par purchasing power. Minus $2.9 thousand. The 167th place in the world.
In Vietnam, there is no uniform minimum wage for the whole country. She is established on 4 economic regions of the country divided on the level of development and cost of life since January 1, 2020 in a month.
The region of I-4.42 million dong. $190.51. The region of 3.92 million dong. $168.94. The region of 3.43 million dong. $147.83. The region of 3.07 million dong. $132.31. In Vietnam, in labor unions, only a small part of working consists.
As of the middle of 2014 in the country there were 116,000 primary trade union organizations which members were more than 8.3 million people.
At the same time in the country often there are, generally at the foreign enterprises, strikes. For 2009-2011 in Vietnam there was 1712. At the beginning of the old years the law about bases of sending the Vietnamese labor migrants abroad under contracts came into force. As a result, from 2001 to 2011 the number working abroad increased from people to people. Natural resources: phosphates, coal, manganese, chromites, deposits of oil and gas on the sea shelf, the wood, hydraulic power. The industry: 15% working, 40% of TDD. The cell phones, consumer electronics completing to computers and the office equipment, processing of agricultural products, clothes, footwear, oil production, shipbuilding. Services industry: -33% working, 39% of TDD. Jobless: -6.5%. 2009. The electric power in the country is developed mainly on hydroelectric power stations, and if the beginning of a rainy season is late, then there come interruptions in production of electricity. In plans for development, construction of the first nuclear power plant in the province of Ninh Thuận on the Russian project and by means of the Russian experts. Besides, it is supposed that the new center of the nuclear researches, Center of Nuclear Science and Technologies, will be built by also Russian experts. Agriculture: 52% working, 21% of TDD. Rice, coffee, rubber-bearing plants, cotton, tea. The total area of tea growing about 131,000 hectares. Income of the industry is about $150 million a year, of them 70% an export share. Pepper, soy, cashew, sugarcane, peanut, bananas. Bird: catch of fish and seafood. The International Organization of Coffee reported that for the first half of 2012 this country of Southeast Asia for 13% overtook Brazil on production of coffee beans. Thus, Vietnam for the first time in the history became the world's largest exporter of coffee beans.
Are among the largest companies of Vietnam:
PetroVietnam, Vietnam Oil and Gas Group, Samsung Electronics Vietnam, Petrolimex, Vietnam National Petroleum Group, Vietnam Electricity, Vietal Group, Vinh Sun Refining and Petrochemical Company, VZair, Vietnam Posts and Telecommunications Group, VNept, PetroVietnam Oil Corporation, Dichi Oil, Vinacoman, Vietnam National Coal and Mineral Industries Group, Vietnam Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development, Agribank, Vietselpetro, Vietnam Airlines, PetroVietnam Gas, Dichi Gas, Petro-Vietnam Exploration Production Corporation, VIEP, Honda Vietnam, FSAP, F Southern Power Corporation, Bank for Investment and Development of Vietnam, BID, Vietnam Bank, Vietnam Commercial Bank for Industry and Trade, EVNP, EV Northern Power Corporation, OG Gold and Gems Group, Saigon Jewelry Company, Asia Commercial Bank EPT Group, Corporation for Financing and Promoting Technology, Vina Milk, Vietnam Dairy Products Joint Stock Company, Vietnam Technological and Commercial Bank, Saigon Thung Tin Commercial Bank, Vietnam Export-Import Commercial Bank, Phu Nuon Jewelry Company, Hoa Phat Group and Maritime Commercial Bank are among the largest private Vietnamese companies. Also Tan Tao Group, Petro-Vietnam Insurance, Hao-Jiang Pharmaceutical, Petro-Vietnam Fertilizer and Chemicals, Dong Phu Rubber, Petro-Vietnam Drilling and Well Services, Vinashin Petroleum Investment Transport are among the largest companies of Vietnam.
Vietnam exports crude oil, seafood, rice, coffee, rubber, tea, clothes and footwear.
$214 billion in 2017. The main buyers, the USA 20.1%, China 14.5%, Japan 8%, South Korea 7%. Vietnam imports industrial output, oil products, fertilizers, grain, cotton, cement, motorcycles. $211.1 billion in 2017. The main suppliers, China 25.8%, South Korea 20.5%, Japan 7.8%, Thailand 4.9%. In the last USSR and Vietnam closely cooperated in different areas. Agriculture, oil production, construction and sciences, not to mention the military and technical industry. Now many projects are closed, but the giant oil-producing enterprise, Vietsopetrol, in the city of Vung Tau and center of tropical researches of RAS in Hanoi still works. With offices in Ho Chi Minh and Nha Trang. Cooperation in power with the Russian holding Power Machines continues.
In total in the country 64 projects with participation of the Russian capital for the sum of $393 million. Without Vietsopetrol are registered. In 2008 VimpelCom together with GTEL Corporation, founded the Vietnamese-Russian company, GTEL Mobile Jesk, from shares of actions of 49%. From August 2009 to September 2012 GTEL Mobile made services of cellular communication under the Bilin Vien brand in three largest cities of the country, Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh and Da Nang.
In April 2012, because of failures and disagreements with the Vietnamese shareholders, VimpelCom abandoned the market of the country, having transferred all the stocks to the Vietnamese side.
Long time hampered the economic growth of Vietnam. The American embargo and excessive guardianship of the Soviet state, the foreign capital in the country, wasn't welcomed.
In December 1988, the Vietnamese government adopted the law on foreign investments, which it guaranteed to the companies from other states that their property and profit won't be nationalized. To Vietnam, the companies from the countries of the Pacific Rim, first of all South Korea and Australia, and then and many others stretched at first.
And in 1997 the Parliament of Vietnam allowed all provinces and districts to make the foreign trade operations independently.
Since January 11, 2007, Vietnam became the 150th member of the World Trade Organization. Although
in recent years, many foreign companies which are especially working in the sphere of consumer electronics and high technologies transfer the production and research capacities from the neighboring China to Vietnam.
Cheaper labor, tax benefits, and proximity to already operating plants and the logistics centers in China, Korea, and Japan are the main reasons of it. Among the largest investors, Samsung. Production of smartphones. LG Electronics. Production of TZ. Nokia. Production of mobile phones. Panasonic. Production of consumer electronics. Intel. Production of chips. Fuji Xerox. Production of printers. In Vietnam, poverty level is high.
In 2006, the level of poverty was established in the city in an equivalent of $0.54 a day per capita, in rural areas -$0.42.
Later, these indicators were indexed on the rate of inflation. For fight against poverty, a number of state programs was adopted. Government Program No. 135 for development of the mountain and remote territories. It is approved in 1998. 21 trillion dong were allocated to provincial banks. Banks granted soft loans to 2362 communes in 22 provinces. After implementation of Program No.
135, the share of the population living in extreme poverty decreased from 37.4% in 1998 to 12.6% in 2011.
Vietnam differs in quite high level of inequality in income, and the gap in general grows. In 2002, countrywide income of the top 20% of group exceeded income of the lower 20% of group by 8.1 times, and in 2010 already by 9.2 times.
In the country, there are, according to official figures, 3.55 million disabled people whose average amount of the state pension was in 2007, 2008 $10 depending on where. Also, someone behind them carried out leaving.
In the late 90s, general free medical insurance captured 6 million people, or 8-9% of the population of Vietnam. Almost in each rural point there are health workers.
In 2008, reform of health care, as a result of which in 2010 the share of the population captured by compulsory health insurance grew to 62%, began.
The huge role in transportations is played by the water transport, -5149 km of the navigable rivers and channels, over 3000 km. The sea coast and extensive lake network are served by thousands of coasting vessels, private boats and boats. In most cases, the cost of a trip needs to be coordinated directly with the captain or the owner of the vessel. Overland highways of Vietnam have extent about 93.3 thousand km, and only 10,000 km. Routes have an asphalt covering the sources and specified 223 days, the others represent either gravel, highways, or soil country roads. Total length of the railroads of the country about 2.6 thousand km. Mostly all of them narrow gauge, are served by the state company Vietnamese Railroads. The most dense network of the railroads connects the north and the south of the country on the coast with a separate branch to Beijing. The majority of flights go 2 times a week. Structures are quite old, move slowly, with frequent stops, but are more spacious and safe in comparison with buses. There are several types of cars: sedentary rigid, sedentary soft, rigid sleeping, soft sleeping and sleeping with the conditioner. Level of service improves depending on E-class. Soft sleepers are quite modern and are located in cars of the European sample. The most convenient the Express Reunion is considered. 1730 km ply between Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh. Other flights are designated by a digital alphabetic combination. E, the Express, S, Fast, etc. Tickets need to be bought in advance and to keep until the end of the travel. In Vietnam, 20 civil airports, including international work. Hanoi, Da Nang and Tan Son Nhut in Ho Chi Minh. Tan Son Nhut, the airport, largest in the country, through which there passes most of passengers of the international flights.
On a state planning committee in 2015 in Vietnam, 7 more international airports will open.
Hue, Cam Ranh, Phu Quoc, Hay Phong Cat Bi, Can Tho and Long Can. The last is to accept 100 million passengers annually, since 2025 when it is completely put into operation.
In 2012, the state airline Vietnam Airlines had the fleet in 86 passenger planes and planned to expand it to 170 by 2020.
Also in the country, several private airlines, including Air Making, Bamboo Airways, Jetstar Pacific Airlines, Vasco and Vietjet Air work. Airport collecting is raised from all passengers. On the international flights it makes from $12. At a departure of the airports of Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi, up to $8. From Da Nang. On internal minus 20,000 dong. From the airports of the central cities. And 10,000 dong. From provincial.
Long-distance buses are very cheap and cover practically all territory of the country.
The most part of the park is in a shabby state, cause most often move extremely slowly and are constantly crowded. There are special regular buses, A-bays, which are ideally designed for wealthy locals and foreigners. Are equipped with the conditioner, the place is specified in the ticket. But even they seldom gather speed more than 50 km/h.
A real alternative are minibuses, which can be rented practically in any tourist bureau or transport company at rather low price.
Many buses stop directly on the route to pick up or land passengers. In Ho Chi Minh you can acquire tickets in Pham Nhu Lao as a tourist district of the city. From there go including open buses.
Also, it is possible to buy the ticket for the bus on a reception of your hotel.
If don't sell, then we'll surely specify to you where to address. In general, bus tickets, at least in Mina, all who feel like a trade, it is only worth ordering in advance, at least in a half a day. All buses with soft seats and conditioners, and there it can even be cold. Along some routes special sleeping buses with lying places go.
The largest religious philosophical doctrines of the East, the Buddhism and Confucianism, had a strong impact on formation of the Vietnamese culture, together with which the corresponding art traditions of India and China also got to the country.
At the same time, during some periods of history, the Chinese culture was spread by violent methods, especially it was shown in the 1st and 7th centuries. Also, despite foreign influence, in the rural environment the national cultural tradition, Dinglang, is formed. She included religious representations, difficult ceremonies and rituals, cult architecture and a sculpture, a national picture. And many of types of traditional art, though underwent some changes, remain today.
The highest achievement of the Vietnamese art of the period of antiquity are the well-known bronze products from northern Vietnam relating to culture Dong Son.
The 9-8 centuries BB, the I-2 centuries AD, which were found there in the end of the 17th century. Among these bronze finds there were instruments of labor, jewelry, pieces of household utensils and also widely known bronze drums used during agricultural ceremonies.
During an era of the Chinese expansion of the I-10 centuries, there is an acquaintance of Vietnamese to higher technology of pottery. Now glazed faience products are made of clay. Bowls, lamps, censers, collar tile.
In the 3rd century, production of paper from bark and leaves of an Aloyne tree and seaweed begins. Distribution is gained by art varnishes. Weaving from jute, linen, bamboo fibers gains further development. High level in the 8-10 centuries is reached by art of production of silk fabrics.
In the 11th-12th centuries, the Buddhism, which became the state religion, has a strong impact on various spheres of life of Vietnam.
The unprecedented scope is reached by construction of temples, pagodas and monasteries. However, constructions of the period practically didn't remain. Ideas of them can be made only according to excavation and to inscriptions on memorable steles. Images of a dragon who was among 4 sacred animals, on an equal basis with a phoenix, a unicorn and a turtle, were indispensable attribute of a temple decor. The dragon was considered as the ancestor patron of Vietnamese and was esteemed as the owner of elements of water. The motive of 4 sacred animals, to whom 4 more sacred animals, fish are sometimes added, a bat, a mythical crane and a tiger, is most widespread in decorative art of Vietnam. Other widespread elements are the 8 precious objects, symbolizing wealth and education, a pumpkin fruit, a brush tip, a fan from fig leaves, a flute, a flowers basket, a sword, a gun, a broom from feathers. 8 fruits, a peach, pomegranate, plum, pear, a fruit, Buddha's hand, grapes, a kalabasa, round pumpkin. 4 plants, a flower of a peach, a chrysanthemum, a bamboo, an orchid. 4 seasons.
11/the 14th centuries became the period of considerable development of production of ceramics, which on collar waterings was divided into 2 views.
Chai exchanges, with glaze of collar of nephrite, and chai exchanges of Aing, with glaze of collar of ivory. At the end of the 19th century, the national picture gains distribution. These pictures were carried out in many villages and in view of the low price could be acquired by any peasant. The subject of images could be religious, congratulatory, guarding, historical, literary or satirical. During the French colonization, the people of Vietnam have an opportunity of familiarizing with the European culture. In the country, the network of professional schools opens, the Higher School of Fine Arts is based. Vietnamese open for themselves a new type of the fine arts, easel painting. In the 20th century, traditional picturist technicians receive new judgment. Easel painting on silk and varnish easel painting appears. In the 10th-12th centuries, early monuments to the Vietnamese writing on the Hanvana were created. 13–the 14th centuries, the period of formation of the court poetry which apprehended Buddhist outlook. In a poetic and prosaic form, in such works as An Appeal to Military Leaders, of Tran Hung Dao, the subject of opposition to Mongols is reflected. In the 14th century, the short story, The Meeting of Miracles and Sacraments of the Earth Twists appears. Since the 15th century, the poetry on colloquial originates Twists, the collection of verses in the native language, Nguyen of Chue. The important role in development of this direction was played by the Literary Association, Meeting of 28 Stars. In the 16th century, of high level the dramatic art and theatre reached. At the end of 17th, the beginning of the 18th centuries, the historical and epic poem about feats of historical and legendary heroes, the Book of the Heavenly South, was issued. In 18th, the beginning of the 19th centuries, there is a genre of the lyrical poem, reflecting interior, and a genre of the poem on family and household subjects. These traditions were united by the poem, Plaints of the Tormented Soul, Nguyen Zu. From the second half of the 19th century, literature developed in colonial conditions. Modern genres, the short story, the novel, the modern drama, appear in the 20th century under the influence of the European literature. After the Revolution of 1945, the taking place events received display in numerous prosaic and poetic works in the spirit of socialist realism. The Western philosophical and literary directions had an impact on literature of the southern Vietnam. Personalism, existentialism, etc. In 1968, the novel In the Spirit of Literature of The Lost Generation, The Violet Horizon, Van Kuanga was written. Since 1976, literature is formed in a uniform state. At the end of the 20th century, the social and psychological prose appears. Painting of the 15th, 18th centuries are temple paintings, rolls on silk and paper. Distribution is gained by cult painting, landscapes, and a popular print which main centers of production were Hanoi and Dong Ho in his vicinities. As a plot of popular prints, legends were used. Literary works got big popularity. New Year's the Picture and in the 20th century, as a result of connection of national and European traditions, varnish painting and easel painting on silk appeared. A founder of the last is Nguyen Phang Thien. In northern Vietnam, in architecture of one millennium ad influence of the Chinese tradition, for example, barrows with the Clinchete arch or stone sculptures of animals was reflected. In the central Vietnam, influence of the Indian traditions is felt. A typical cult construction of Diem Pi is the brick building in the form of a tower standing on a high sokal and which is coming to the end step Navarshi. In registration of facades of buildings, sculptural images of deities of a Hindu pantheon were used. Blossoming of architecture of northern Vietnam is connected with formation of the centralized state of Dai Viet. Through the whole country, Buddhist temples and monasteries are built. The symmetry of the plan and use of A3 as main material is characteristic of them. Planning of the Temple of Literature and architectural receptions used at his construction demonstrate the Chinese influence.
The Temple de Pagoda on one column is an example of seclusion and refined decorative effect in cult architecture of Vietnam.
The architecture of the 13th-18th centuries is presented by the temples of various religions, mausoleums of dignitaries covered by bridges and the markets. Among the most significant temple and monastic constructions there are complexes Booth Tap and Tai Phuong. The 13th-14th centuries are reconstructed in the 17th-18th centuries. Monuments of Bakshansky culture, sets of lithophones, cultures Dongshan, bronze drums remained. Traditional music was under the influence of China.
She also inherited the culture of the state Yampi, which was so high that it was used in Japan. The sources and specified 1526 days and the Khmer state of Funan.
In the 11th, 13th centuries there are musical theatrical forms, theatre. In the 13th, 18th centuries the court music, including great music and graceful music, represented orchestral compositions, anthems, dance music. Music came under influence of Chan Buddhism. The people of Vietnam have the traditions and tools, Jews harps, xylophones, gongs, earth zithers, version string. Since the end of the 19th century music comes under the European influence. In the 1920th years there is a musical theatre. In the 1930th years Massachusetts songs, in the 1940th jazz appear. In the 1950th the National Composer School is created, the European genres of the opera, symphony, etc. are adopted. In 1970, the 1980th years many musicians studied in CCC.
The theatre which cornerstoned the cult of ancestors arose as court entertainment in the 11th, 13th centuries in the north of Vietnam.
He developed under the Chinese influence. From China the makeup and suits were borrowed. Action wasn't divided into acts. Gestures, intonations, suits were important. Scenery weren't used. In the repertoire plays about events of the Vietnamese history and processing of the Chinese plots prevailed.
In 19 by request of the Imperial Yard the playwright Tang Da creates a number of works in a genre.
Tao is the improvised folk theatre. Comes from annual celebrations in honor of harvesting of rice. Turns on folk music, dances, choral singing. Plays often had satirical focus, convicting defects of the highest estates. The greatest popularity was gained by the playwright Nguyen Din Ng. The first half of the 20th century. He created more than 50 historical, comedy and satirical plays. In the 20th century Tao gradually forces out the musical theatre relying on art of vagrant singers. Here modern national melodies, scenery, a curtain, lighting effects, division into acts were used. This genre was popularized by Tai Lo's poet. Kitna, modern colloquial or drama theatre. In the years of war of 1946, 1954 and Kitney were the most popular genres. In Vietnam there is also puppet theatre on water.
In the 21st century, with development of television and cinema, traditional theatrical genres fall into decay.
Because of reduction of budgetary funds, some theaters were disbanded, private theaters, studios and enterprises appeared. There are 4 kinds of traditional dance of Vietnam: national, religious, court and theatrical. National dances take place under drum sounds, each rashetek and singing. There are a dance of a plough, dance of oarsmen, dance of live chessmen, New Year's dance of a unicorn, dance of entreaty about a rain. Other type of dances is executed by members of religious communities, for example, dance of the sorcerer with aromatic sticks.
A dance of a mu and a mua cha, executed by shaman female.
Also the dance of 6 gifts, executed by Buddhist monks. Dances were widespread at the yards of emperors, for example, but having the Chinese roots, dance of dates was executed by 128 dancers, dance 3 stars, dance of 4 legendary animals: a dragon, a unicorn, a phoenix and a turtle. Dance of female warriors.
The dances connected with theater and Tao have deep study of a form, each movement or gesture reflect an emotional condition of the character.
In the 1920th years, choreographic miniatures widely extended. In 1961 the first multivant ballet performances were put. Ballet dancers were trained in the socialist countries.
The movie Kim, Van and Caillou of 1923, on a plot of the classical novel Nguyen Du, is considered the first feature film shot in the Vietnamese territory of the French Indochina. In 1920-1940, under the leadership of the French and Chinese cinematographers, there some also act mute and sound films, such as Madame J.
1929 cut. Spesh. The Valley of Ghosts. 1938 cut. Chan Phi. Evening on the Mekong River. 1940 cut. A. Zhao. Etc. After declaration of Derv in 1945, the semi-underground documentary cinema, for example, movies about fight against the French colonialism, construction of channels, fight against a drought, began to develop. In 1954, after leaving of the French, Vietnam was divided into northern and southern. The first Vietnamese cinematographers studied in France or in the USSR.
In the southern Vietnam, commercially focused or propaganda anti-communist movies which processing and installation are made a broader shot at this time. In 1956, together with Philippines, the well-known South Vietnamese anti-communist film We Want to Live was shot.
Cut. Vinh Nguyen and Manuel Kant. In northern Vietnam, the first film studio is created in 1956. In 1959 there was the first in-derv game film, On Coast of One River. Cut. Ham Hai Yuzan and Nguyen Hong Gen Ji.
In the 1960th years, in the North Vietnamese cinema, subjects of socialist construction in the north of Vietnam, liberating fight developed.
In 1975, after the victory of communists, northern and southern Vietnam were integrated again.
In 1970, the 1980th years, the main subjects of cinema were the heroism of army and the people and construction of socialist society. At a boundary of the 20-21 centuries, the Vietnamese directors sought to depart from ideological cliches and promotion, characteristic as a search of new forms.
Joint shootings of movies with participation of the former emigrants, cinematographers of the Vietnamese diaspora were widely adopted.
In Vietnam, training of specialists for the film industry is carried out at the State Institute of Theatre and Cinema Vietnam. Since 1970 in Vietnam, the National Vietnamese Film Festival is regularly held. Since 2003, the International Vietnamese Viet Filmfest film festival, in which also active part is taken also by cinematographers of Vietnam, is regularly held to the USC, the International Film Festival of Cinematographers of the Vietnamese Diaspora. The polygamy actively practiced in Vietnam through many centuries up to his ban by the Communist Party of Vietnam in 1959.
However, after the war in Vietnam, 1957-1975,
the illegal polygamy caused by the gender imbalance formed as a result of death of a large number of men during this war remained rather widespread phenomenon.
In the country, such sports as soccer, table tennis, chess, traditional martial arts are popular. Since 1952, athletes of Vietnam participate in the Summer Olympic Games. For all history, Vietnamese won 1 gold and 3 silver awards. Only in the history of Vietnam Olympic the champion, the shooter from the Vinh Hoang Xuan Gun, who won at the Games of 2016. Athletes of Vietnam didn't participate in the Winter Olympic Games yet. Vietnam constantly participates and tries to obtain achievements in the Asian Championships and Games of Southeast Asia. At the Games of 2003, Vietnam was the host country, and athletes of the country won the first place in an all-medal count. At the last Games of 2015 in Singapore, as well as at the Games of 2011 in Indonesia and 2013 in Myanmar. In the overall medal count, the national team of Vietnam took the 3rd place.
In 2007, the country hosted the Soccer Championship of Asia together with Thailand, Indonesia and Malaysia.
The command appeared group, but was inferior in a quarter-final to future victor of the championship to Iraq.
In 2019, the national team of Vietnam the second time acted on the Cup of Asia and again reached a quarter-final where conceded to 0-1 Japan.
In 2008 and 2018, Vietnam won in the Soccer ASEAN Championship. In the 2010 year's progress in chess was outlined. At the Chess Olympiad of 2018, Vietnam took the 8th place. The Grandmaster Le Coin Liem since 2015 enters in top -50 the world ranking of FIDE. In the country, the Seansa option under the name is popular tutoring. Also in 2012 in Vietnam held the first international cycle race, the Tour of Vietnam. Also far. Write comments. Read comments. Interesting people will tell interesting stories. All of good mood and good luck.